Hello everybody, and welcome back to day 52 of the Road to 2K on chess.com. Now what you're going to notice is that today, tomorrow, and the next day's video are all going to look a little bit different. I did just finish a 3-day classical tournament of 6 rounds of 90 plus 30-minute increment action. So to give myself a little bit of a recovery phase from that tournament, we're going to go ahead, we're going to look at the games in depth that I played. We'll talk a little bit about how the moves went and how the actual tournament went itself, and really try and use these moments and these instructive points in the game to further learn how we can improve our positions and how we can improve our chess. All these things you're going to see me refer to, I have illustrated in my little chess notation book right here. So as it starts, if we look at the game, in game 1, we played a young man named Mr. Arush, who was 1375, and we entered this tournament sitting at 1600 flat. In this position, I actually had the black pieces. So what we saw was we had e4, we had c6, d4, d5, e takes, c takes, bishop d3. And at this point, we're still in theory for the Caro-Kann defense, the exchange variation. I played knight to f6. Our opponent played h3. And h3 is a very interesting move. And the whole idea of h3 is actually that our opponent is preventing us from playing bishop to g4 after they bring their knight out to f3. And it also makes it so bishop d3 stops our bishop from coming to f5. So, in a lot of advanced Caro-Kann positions and a lot of exchange Caro-Kann positions, the slight square bishop tends to come out before you play e6, and our opponent is essentially stopping that with their pawn and piece play right off the rip. So what happened in the game is we played knight to c6, just bringing our second knight out. Our opponent played knight to f3, and at this point, I opted to go ahead and play queen to c7. This is not the engine's best move, but the entire idea of this move is actually to stop our opponent from playing bishop to f4, at which point the opponent's bishop stares into our position, and really this just gets our queen off of a starting square. And now we also have ideas where we're targeting the c2 pawn at some point. Now, obviously, we can't do that very efficiently in this position, but there's some long-term ideas of queen to c7. Our opponent played bishop to d2, which I thought was a little bit slow. The engine evaluation is that it actually wants our opponent to play castles right off the start, because that gets the opponent, gets the king out of the center, and then they can play moves like rook to e1 and develop their bishop to g5. However, like we said, bishop to d2, and here I thought for quite some time, and I thought I ended up playing e5, which was not the correct move ultimately. E5 is simply a mistake because of the variation that almost happened in the game. Is after d takes, if I would have played knight captures e5, our opponent can actually go ahead, play queen to e2 first. At which point, if we try and hold on to this piece, our opponent can play knight takes, bishop takes, and hit us immediately with f4, which is going to win the bishop. And as soon as we played this, and as soon as we kind of sat down and our opponent looked at the move and took the pawn, I realized that we had made a mistake. So instead, after d captures e5, I stopped. I took some time here, and I ended up playing the move knight to e4. Trying to go for some counterplay, attacking this dark square bishop, putting my knight in the center, and saying, you know what, I lost a pawn, but we're going to try and play actively. We're going to try and play aggressive and really get into the position. Now, engine's best move here, which I thought my opponent was going to play, is knight to c3. It develops the second knight, it adds an attacker here, and it does kind of pose a question of what we want to do. Because if we are too passive when we play a move like bishop to f5, a move like knight captures d5 is just a free pawn, tempoing our queen. This is even weaker than it was before, and we're going to run into some big issues. However, our opponent ended up playing queen to e2, which loses the entire advantage on the spot. And in this position, I was already down about 30 minutes on the clock. I had an hour and 9 minutes left on my clock. So I ended up playing bishop to f5, trying to hold on to this knight, keep it in the center of the board, and really see what would happen. Our opponent took the piece, and here you can already see this engine evaluation drops pretty significantly. Here I had to take another about 10 minutes before I did anything, and I ended up playing d captures e4 to displace the knight. The knight jumps over to h4, and at this point you play the beautiful move knight to d4, attacking the queen, attacking the c2 pawn. We can see now some of the ideas of queen to c7 coming to fruition. We did have to be careful, though, is our bishop is still hanging on f5. Now, obviously, our opponent doesn't want to capture the knight or capture the bishop, because then we're going to capture their queen. They can maybe develop a piece, at which point I would just trade after bishop takes, maybe even move like, oh gosh, I don't know. Quick thought is bishop to c5 should work. But instead, our opponent plays queen to d1, which I expected. We played knight captures c2, forking the king and the rook in the corner. Our opponent plays king to f1. And in this position, seeing that I don't immediately have to move over, I played the move bishop to e6 first, saving my bishop from the view of the knight, preparing to get to c4, because the secondary idea in this position where I thought I was going to run into some trouble is if our opponent were to play a move like queen to c1. What we have to be careful for is maybe we play a move like queen to c4 check. The king slides over again, and now we can take the rook in the corner because our queen is no longer hanging. Versus if we look in this position, and let's say we play the wrong move like, I don't know, bishop to d7 and queen to c1, we are no longer able to actually capture the rook in the corner because we're going to have queen capture c7, and our opponent is simply up a queen for a rook, and they should go on to win this position. Now in the game, our opponent ended up playing knight to c3, at which point, we have to take our material where we can. I take the knight in the corner, the queen comes over and captures a1, and I thought for a while in this position about what I wanted to do, and what I decided to see after about another 10 minutes from that previous position is the knight is trapped. The knight has no retreat squares. G5 doesn't quite work yet because of bishop captures g5. But what does work is bishop to e7, which is what we played in the position. The knight is now going to get traded off at the minimum. After move g3, I blitzed out pretty quickly. Bishop captures h4, g captures h4, and arrive in this position where not only do we have a material advantage with the exchange, but our opponent's pawns are isolated and all just kind of on their own, and our pawns are relatively healthy and together. In this position, after thinking for approximately 5 more minutes, I played queen captures e5, taking the pawn in the center of the board. Queen to e1 came in. I played bishop to f5, desperately trying to hold on to this e4 pawn. Now, what I probably should have done is a move like rook to d8, where I'm just attacking the bishop on d2. It precludes our opponent from taking here. If they want to go for this exchange, they can, and now we're going to castle and consolidate the position up the exchange. But instead, bishop f5, f3, and I got kind of stuck in this position. I didn't really know what to do, so I ended up playing rook to d8 first. The idea eventually did come. The opponent takes with the knight in here, being up the exchange. I said, okay, let's go ahead. Let's trade everything down. Bishop captures e4, and f captures e4. And I would have been even more happy if queen captures e4, we take with the queen first, and then we take the bishop, and we're up a rook. So obviously that didn't happen. Our opponent is smarter than that. They played f captures e4. We castled here, thinking we're out of the center, and really our other rook is going to come into the position. Bishop to c3 I expected, so I met it fairly quickly with queen to f4 check, king to g2, and then rook f to e8, activating our final piece, trying to take advantage of this exchange. After the move e5, which I didn't fully expect, I played rook to e6, thinking that I was threatening a mate on g6. What I missed, however, is after the move rook f1, which our opponent did in the game. So what I'm talking about here is if a move like a3, we can play rook g6 check, queen comes in, rook captures, king over, queen here, and that is mate. However, my opponent played rook to f1, and I completely missed that the king can now actually run to h1 in the corner, and it's simply not going to work. Now, this is a frustrating part for me, is at this point I was down 15 minutes on the clock. It was 45 minutes to 27:16. And I had an idea stuck in my head already about what I wanted to do. So I played rook to g6 first, forcing the king to h1. And in this position, I did the one thing that you should never do in a classical tournament, is I blitzed out a move. I already thought I knew what I wanted to do in my head, and I thought I had a ladder staircase mate getting to h2 by getting on the light squares with c4. What I should have done here is, if I would have taken a moment and thought, I could have played the beautiful move rook to d3, with the idea that if your opponent takes the queen, you play queen, captures h3, and that is just checkmate. And there is no good way to stop this mate. If your opponent comes up with the queen, you can go ahead. You can also take here. This comes over, and queen captures h2 is going to be checkmate. Your opponent can, try and block, and at the same time you do the same thing where queen captures f3, the king comes up, check here. Oh, wait, sorry, not check there. Let's go with queen h3, check. So really, just an embarrassing spot for us where we didn't find the move rook to d3, which is mate in 3. Instead, we played queen to c4, thinking that we could get in on these light squares. My opponent plays queen to f2, now threatening a mate threat of his own on f7, where if I'm not careful, and let's say I play queen to c5, I guess it's not a mate because that covers. Let's maybe play a less defensive move. Let's play h3 or a6. I guess this is still defended. Okay. Ignore me for a minute. I'm just losing my mind. We'll play queen to a4. Queen takes here. Queen check. And that is just going to be checkmate with back rank issues. So I played here queen to c6 check, the king to h2, and I played the move queen to e6, trying to keep the queen active and attacking the king, but also defending the vulnerable f7 square. My opponent played h5, and even here, the engine's best move is to play rook to d3. You can't actually take this because then you're going to have queen captures h3 check, king to g1, rook to g3, queen takes, queen check, king over. And you can I would probably in this position just play queen captures g6. However, once again, none of that happened. I didn't find it the first time. I played rook to h6, which traps my rook in the corner effectively. There is no way for it to get out. My opponent plays queen to h4, threatening my rook on d8. So at this point, I was really starting to feel the pressure. I was down to about... Oh gosh, where would we have been here? Yeah, I was down 30 minutes on the clock now. I played queen to d5 to defend, queen to g5. I needed to find the move f6 here, which I did not. I played queen to d3. My opponent plays rook to g1, threatening mate in 1 and threatening to win this rook. So ultimately, to stay alive, I played rook to g6. It's the only move in the position that stops everything. My opponent took with the pawn. I took back with the h-pawn. Queen to g3, queen f5. And the time situation here is my opponent had 32 minutes on the clock, and I had about a minute and 13 seconds. So in any situation, I think you should play on if you're playing in white in this position, because not only are you up the full piece, but you have all the pressure, you have the time, you should sit down, figure it out. However, after queen to g5, I was a little bit puzzled, so I played back queen to d3. My opponent played queen g3 and offered me a draw. And I thought down my last minute, and I'm down a full piece on the clock. So ultimately, I shook this young man's hand. I said I agreed to a draw, and the game ended peacefully. So my opponent definitely let me off the hook here. Fantastically played game by Arush. I hope he continues to play because it was really a wonder to watch him play. But we enter the tournament. We are 1.5 out of 1 for the morning game, and we head into our evening game. So, in the evening game, we played Mr. Dexter. We had the white pieces this time. He is a 1394, and once again, we are a 1600. So, we played e4. And he played c5 quite confidently. Now, the Sicilian is an opening where, as you've seen in my rapid games, I'm not the most familiar with the theory. I'm still trying to figure it out. I've been working on some dragon lines. I've been working on some lines where they play the early e5 that weakens the dark squares. So I really had to figure out this position on my own, and it was not a position I loved. Is after d6, d4, c takes, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, bishop c4, and queen to b6. Queen to b6 on move 6 is officially where I was out of theory. So what I opted to do here is, seeing that the queen is threatening the b2 square technically, and there's two attackers on the knight, I was supposed to find the move knight to b3, which stops all of these ideas. However, I end up taking the knight on c6, b captures c6, and here if my opponent were to go queen captures c6, it's immediately a blunder because of the brutal bishop to b5 defended by the knight, and at that point you'll be winning a queen. However, b captures c6, we castled here, g6, we played h3, bishop to g7, rook to e1, castles, and bishop to b3, seeing so that we are running out of ideas where if we play a nothing move like a3, our opponent can probably play knight captures e4. Actually, I'm sorry, you can't play knight captures e4 because there's two defenders. So bishop to b3 is more of an idea in positions from the dragon variation, where once your opponent castles, you play bishop to b3 to get out of center fork trick ideas. But in this position, like I said, castles, bishop b3, and my opponent played a5, intending to attack my bishop here on b3. Now at this point, I was already starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I played bishop to e3 first, attacking the queen, forcing it back to queen to c7, which I was told later by some of my stronger friends that the queen typically loves to live on c7 in these Sicilian positions, which is something I'm still learning and trying to deal with. So I played a3 to meet a4 with bishop to a2. My opponent played bishop to b7, putting it on an active diagonal. I played queen to d2. And in this position, what I was kind of thinking about is, because my opponent has fianchettoed his dark square bishop, if I can trade that bishop off, it significantly weakens the queen and might give me chances to push for a win. However, with playing queen to c7, my opponent had used -2 minutes, was at 1 minute and 32. And at this point, I was already at 1 hour and 25 minutes left, so down another 30 minutes on the clock in game 2. Now, my opponent played c5. I played bishop to h6, rook f to d8, and not wanting to get into any nonsense, I take the bishop off on g7. The king capture is nearly forced, and knight to d5, bringing my knight into the center of the board. Now, before playing knight to d5, I did burn about another 12 minutes on the clock because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to bring the knight there or if I wanted to bring the bishop there to d5. Apparently, the engine's best variation is bishop to c4, which effectively stops the move d5 and stops the move c4. But after knight d5, my opponent took with the bishop. I took with the bishop as well, attacking the rook in the corner, and it's still attacked by the knight. And my opponent played rook a to b8, and here I fortunately did a blunder check of myself. The move I initially thought of was playing a move like c4, defending the b-pawn, supporting the bishop. What I missed in this position initially when I was doing my calculations is that the move e6 punishes you immediately. The bishop is completely trapped. It'll get taken on any 3 of these squares. So pausing, slowing down in this classical game is something that really saved me, and something that I was glad I'm finally starting to understand as I play these over-the-board events. So instead, I played queen to c3, trying to defend the b-pawn actively, trying to pin the knight and seeing what I could do. Now, the engine's preferred move here is once again bishop to c4, which prevents a lot of this nonsense of the pawn pushes. It actually gives up the b2 pawn, at which point you're supposed to play bishop to b3 and trap the rook. And now, our opponent played king to g8 to break the pin. I played rook a to d8, not seeing a whole lot of need to defend these 3 pawns, because they're all pretty well defended by either each other or the queen. My opponent played rook d to c8, and then I played the break e5, thinking that I was doing something pretty good. At this point, I was down approximately 30 minutes on the clock, 37:57 to 1 minute and 10. My opponent took with the d-pawn. I took with the rook, activating my rook. My opponent played e6, and for a really long time here, I was looking at rook captures e6. However, the opponent obviously has knight captures d5, and at any point, rook captures, and then you're simply going to end up down the rook here in the corner after f captures e6. So, not seeing anything else, I opted to bring a bishop back to c4 first, seeing that there's no attack on the rook, and stopping the move c4 by my opponent. My opponent played queen to b7, and in this position, I took, oh gosh, how long did I take here? I took 10 minutes, putting the time situation at 21:19 to 47:50. I took a breath, and I played the brilliant move, rook captures e6, with the idea that if, and a lot of this happened in the game, or sorry, what I thought was going to happen in the game, is if my opponent plays f captures e6, the move is not the immediate check, because the check leads to king to g7, which holds on to this piece. However, I was looking at the move, queen captures f6, and then my opponent is trying to defend against this. Their best variation is queen to g7, at which point you play bishop captures e6 check, king to h8, queen captures g7, king captures g7, bishop captures c8, rook captures, and this is an endgame where you're simply up 2 pawns. You should be able to convert this every single time, and I feel pretty confident in these positions, although we did see in the game 1 is I'm certainly prone to blundering the advantage. But my opponent stunned me a little bit, and they played the move knight to e4, which I did not expect. Now, knight to e4 is initially a pretty scary move because it attacks the queen, and there is one and only move to keep this advantage. It took me about another 10 minutes, so now it's 12:37 versus 40 minutes, and I played queen to e5, sacrificing the rook again, attacking the knight, and trying to create this massive threat here on the king. My opponent finally accepts the sacrifice with f captures e6. I played bishop captures e6 check, seeing that the king is forced to f8, or they can give up the queen. And after king to f8, I played rook to d7, attacking the queen, forcing it away, trying to get a forced mate on the board. My opponent takes queen captures b2, which is a really nice move because it does defend against this dark square diagonal. And the move I was supposed to find here is queen to f4, after which point, if your opponent goes queen to f6, you play rook captures f7 check. You have to play the king away, because if you were to take here, you are getting mated on f7. After king to e8, rook takes, knight takes, queen takes. It's two rooks versus a queen and a bishop, and the queen and bishop side should win this every single time. However, what happened in the game is I played queen captures e4 first to try and gain some of my material back. My opponent played queen to f6, a pretty beautiful defensive move that I missed in my calculations, unfortunately. And thinking down on the clock, and all the way down until 53 seconds, I played rook f7 check to trade down into a queen versus two rooks endgame, where I am up 1 pawn. So after all this trades down, I am down to a startling 1 minute and 11 seconds left, and this move still has this game still has 27 more moves to go. So I started with queen to d5 check, really just thinking that I was going to try and win one of these pawns via a queen fork. My opponent played king to g7. I played f4, and I believe it was in this position my opponent offered me a draw while they were thinking on their turn, and I asked them, per USCF rules, to make their move first. So my opponent played the move a4, at which point I declined their draw by playing queen to d7 check, king to h6, and you probably notice on the left side of the board, the number jumps to m6. The critical move here was g4, which creates a mating threat on the king. After g5, queen to e7, now you have to make a distraction move, so rook to b1, rook to g1 check, and there are no other moves, rook to g8, queen f6, rook g6, and the stunning move f captures g5, checkmate. However, I did not see that. I played queen captures a4 because I had a minute left on the clock. I need to keep my moves flowing. Rook to b2, queen to d7. After rook c to b8, you have the same idea where it's now mate and 8, but it's the same trap with queen to g4, after which point g5, queen to e7 is the best variation. If they were to take, you actually just go ahead and play queen to f6, checkmate. So where were we? G5. Oh, sorry. I went back a little bit. So queen to D7 attacks the rook. The opponent played rook c to b8, and in this position, I started to see the idea. So I played g4 first. I didn't see the full variation, and at this point, I'm still working with about a minute and a half on my clock because I'm gaining 30 seconds back every single move. My opponent played g5, and the critical move, like we just talked about, was queen to e7. However, what I ended up playing the game is I played queen to e6 check, seeing a little bit of a different sequence. Is after king to g7, queen to e7 check, king h8. I played what I thought was the second most beautiful move to the game after the rook sack of queen captures f6, or queen f6, followed by queen captures g5. Now, I could have taken the pawn here. What I didn't like about just taking the pawn is if I play this queen f6 intermezzo first, it forces the king out of the corner, and then I take the pawn with check. My opponent played king to h8. I played queen to a5 to force them out of the center. I played f5 here, now seeing my win condition is promoting this f-pawn. My opponent played rook 8 to b6. I played f6, thinking I was threatening a checkmate here. However, after rook b8, I played, the best move here is queen to e7, at which point you're almost mating your opponent. However, I played queen to g5, king f7, queen g7, king e6, queen e7, king d5, and here I played the move f7, moving one square closer to promotion. There is no way to stop promotion at this point. My opponent goes rook captures c2, and now I need to be a little bit careful. My opponent has actually weaved quite a nice trap here. If I were to go ahead and just promote, what I thought was going to happen is our opponent can play rook to b1 check. However, we do have queen to f1, at which point you trade down and you end up in this position here. So what I wanted to try and do first is I wanted to try and slow my opponent down. So after rook captures c2, I played queen to d7, king to c4, queen to e6, king to d4, and finally queen to d6 check, forking the king, forking the rook. And now this promotion is going to be significantly easier and just simply can't be stopped. My opponent plays rook to c1 check. I run the king, rook c2, king g3, rook c3, rook h4, and now there are no more available checks in the position. My opponent takes off a pawn because there's really not much else to do here. I played f8 equals queen, and now it's two queens versus the rook. My opponent plays rook to f3, and rather than getting greedy and just trying to convert the endgame, I play queen to b8 check, king d4, queen captures f3. There are no real good moves for the opponent here. The opponent goes h5, and I find the move queen e to e4, checkmate. And day one was in the books. Really kind of two tough games where I found myself significantly down on time pressure. I was playing two lower-rate opponents, so the pressure is certainly on to win as well, to get the tournament started hot. Both Arush and Dexter just played fantastic games, so a lot of credit to them. And we move into day two, sitting at 1.5 out of 2 points. So I know this is a little bit different style video. I appreciate you guys sticking around watching. If you have comments on how the tournament's gone so far, or how I'm doing the recaps, definitely leave it on down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. And then finally, if you check below, make sure that you're subscribed, and that helps you to prevent that you miss, or helps to prevent you from missing any of my future content. And on that note, I will see you guys on the next day.